I've got a few slides to start just for people that aren't familiar with V1 Coach. Let's give a little background of what the coach and the game platform is, and maybe show a few examples of how we can use it. And then we can jump into more of a live demo and make sure we leave plenty of time for questions.
And I think just with the theme that we heard this morning, Dallas, I think from Brian Finnerty and Brian Mogg was talking about the game plan, right? They were talking about game plan for for 2021, maybe in terms of the business right side for the instructors. But Brian Mogg alluded to talking about his students and looking back at 2020. So I think if you can help our audience here tonight kind of think about it, from that perspective of being able to create that plan and using Coach, that'd be, I think, a good follow on from what where we started the day. So
right, that was one of the things that I heard, I guess, this morning is kind of alluding to the PGA Tour pros and how at the end of a season they have the ability to just pull up their stats from the previous season and really look at what they did well or did poorly, and then make that game plan go into the next year. And I think one of the things we want to make clear is that's exactly what V1 Game is, and that's the opportunity that we have here. So just about any data point that they have on the PGA Tour, we can actually give. And so we'll go into that and how we can use a combination of V1 Game and V1 Coach to make those game plans and to go tackle that new year in 2020. So for those of you that aren't familiar, the platform we're talking about here is really V1 Game and V1 Coach. So what this allows you to do is connect our coaches to the on-course performance of their players, right? Anybody who's going to get lessons in general is probably doing so to shoot better scores. So without capturing what's happening on the golf course, it makes it difficult to see where lessons might be translating or not translating when you're trying to make those swing improvements. Because a lot of golf is beyond the swing. It's also course management. It's also decision making and whatnot. And there's lots of areas where our instructors can help our players to improve. So V1 Game is our players facing app. It's a cell phone app, right? So typically the player is going to have their phone on them when they play, and they can track everything about their on-course performance while they play using that phone. And then V1 Coach is an iPad app currently, but it basically connects to that V1 Game. So whenever a player plays, that data goes straight to the cloud. If they have a coach, that coach can be connected with them. The data updates daily, and they can see how their players are playing, where they're struggling, where they're doing well. And then the additional benefit is we do have some artificial intelligence kind of baked into V1 Coach. So for those of you that aren't data nerds like myself, that don't want to stare at a bunch of numbers all day and try to figure it out, we do a lot of the heavy lifting for you to kind of fast track you to where a player should be looking to improve, so that the next time you get to that lessons tee, you're kind of sprinting towards something that needs to be worked on versus maybe asking the student themselves on where they're struggling. Because a lot of times I think what you'll find is they don't know, or what they think they need to work on isn't necessarily the biggest pain point for their game. So with that, this conversation is going to focus on V1 Coach and its capability. We'll cover V1 Game in a little more detail tomorrow. I'll give a little bit of a background on what V1 Game is here, but most of the focus is going to be on the coach aspect and what that app allows us to do. So this slide covers kind of the key V1 Coach capabilities. So first and foremost, it connects you to your players' on-course performance to where you could see every shot they hit, if you like. It's got their shot-by-shot data, and then obviously it's got summarized data and some key points, some key takeaways from their data readily fed to you. The data is automatically updated daily anytime you open the app, and it can be manually refreshed at any time. So say a player plays this morning and has a lesson in the afternoon, you can just click that refresh button there and get their updated data even live. In the background of V1 Coach is some artificial intelligence. That artificial intelligence analyzes the data for you so that you get digestible feedback personalized to the player. And it's not up to you to go stare at numbers and spreadsheets and shot patterns and try to figure out what that player needs to work on. You see that a little bit on the right, so I'll talk about that here in a second. And then it also allows for some player management and some organization. So you can organize your players by skill level to help you manage if you have many players. And I imagine many of our coaches have players that are a variety of skill sets, people that are, scratch, maybe even trying to go pro, all the way up to, your 25 and 30 handicappers for both males and females. We do have selectable references within the app so that you can compare any individual player to kind of their next milestone in their game improvement journey. So you're not you're not always comparing that 10 or 15 handicap to a tour pro where it's going to be discouraging and doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We also have some course management capabilities, so some ability to see, maybe players that are playing the same course over and over again. You can go see where they're making good decisions, bad decisions based on their shot distributions, figure out which holes are the hardest and easiest, and help them, again, make better decisions on the golf course. And then again, you can dive as deep as you want to go with the data that's there. We try to kind of abstract it and give you these nice summaries and easy to digest pieces of information. But if you want to go look at shot by shot details and, see every shot that they hit and what clubs they're picking, the data is there for you to get as dirty as you want to get. So on the right-hand side, you see one example from the app, and we'll go in the live demo later to show it. But what you're seeing here is a list of students that a teacher might have in their group. And in the next section is area for improvement. So we've already looked at the last 5 rounds from each of these players and summarized where they're struggling the most and told you where they should go work if they were working based on those 5 rounds. So you can see that it's personalized per player, with the top player recommending working on their approach game or their irons. The next is driving accuracy, and the third player needs to work on their putting. Again, that's personalized to where their games are. And then on the right-hand side, you have like their average scoring and some places where they may be making mistakes and what their potential score could be if they just improve their mistakes. Now, this snapshot is for tour pros, so that's a little less interesting. I'll show it for some higher handicappers here in a minute, and you can see how you can really leverage some of that potential to motivate some players to maybe break that next milestone, whether it be breaking 100, breaking 90, breaking 80, kind of all of those skill sets are allowed here.
So, Dale, sorry to cut you up. So you mentioned that a few times, just the scores are 85, 90, breaking 90. So current average right now in the database, what's the average score right now that we're seeing? Just to get our coaches that are on the line here, thinking about what types of players this is applicable for.
Yeah, so ballpark, the average across all the rounds in the system, it's probably just under 90. So right around 89 is probably where I'd peg the average of all the scores that are put in there. So of course we have, scratch players and stuff, but this is by no means an app just for lower handicap golfers. In fact, our highest handicap golfers are going to get some of the most benefit out of it, in that they're going to see some big things that they can improve pretty easily and really start chipping away at that handicap. But we have players that'll track, 130 strokes for a single round in our system. And we've tried to make it simple enough that that's not a bottleneck in the tracking and editing when that is required. So average score, probably around 89.
Okay. I mean, I think they're thinking about, and as you get into how to build teams and groups, right, for them to be able to break up their players into buckets, right, or flights, what have you. So, all right, well, I don't want to keep us there too long, right, but I think that's starting to, like I said, allowing our coaches to start thinking. So
one of the first questions we typically get is, yeah, I want to see the analytics on the coach's side, but how does the data get in, and how easy is that? And again, we're going to kind of deep dive that more tomorrow in the V1 game session. But for those of you that aren't familiar with shot tracking, or as familiar, effectively what V1 game is doing is the equivalent of ShotLink on the PGA Tour. So if you've seen ShotLink on the PGA Tour, then you know what it is that we're doing in the background. We're basically recording the locations that the players hit shots. And once you know the locations of where those shots are hit, you can calculate just about anything. You can calculate fairways, greens, scrambling, driving distance. If they're missing to the left, if they're missing to the right, you can calculate how many holes they've gone without a three-putt. You can calculate just about anything once you have those shot locations. And so anything that you see them talk about on the PGA Tour that they can calculate, we can do it in V1 game. Of course, strokes gained is a big piece of that, and strokes gained is crucial for game improvement and for understanding where you're losing strokes and where you can improve. But we take it beyond just strokes gained. We actually break it down. So instead of just saying, hey, you're not very good strokes gained driving, we can then dive into that and say, well, the reason you're not good with strokes gained driving is because you make too many penalties, you're constantly missing to the left, and you're hitting it, short compared to the handicap range that you're trying to tackle. So what you see here is a screenshot of kind of what that looks like after a user's tracked some shots in V1 game. And then in the background, you see how the PGA Tour does it with a ShotLink and the level of information they have for like a round from Justin Thomas. So V1 game is effectively equivalent to ShotLink on the PGA Tour. Really, the only difference is instead of having a bunch of volunteers following you around, shooting your balls with lasers and tracking it that way, we're using GPS and cell phone technology to do it from your pocket. All right, so how does the platform work? Well, you've got a player that's tracking their on-course performance with V1 games. So they've played with it. We have auto shot tracking. We have swing detection with an Apple Watch. We have a bunch of different ways to get that data. But in the end, the player's basically just putting in scores. We're doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and that on-course performance is tracked. That on-course performance automatically feeds into our V1 Coach platform. And then in the V1 Coach platform, we have our artificial intelligence and our algorithms that go look at that data and digest it into pieces to where what you're looking at is easy to digest visualizations that represent what the player is doing. So in the top piece here, we have a player whose area for improvement is approach. What you're looking at there is a shot distribution chart where you see that they're hitting the green in regulation 61% of the time, and then they tend to miss short. If anything, they've got a pretty good distribution from left to right. So it's not really a directional miss, it's more of a distance miss for that particular player. But we've done all that analysis to give that to you so that you can just take that piece and say, okay, why are we missing short? Are we misclubbing? Are we mishitting the ball? What's the reason for missing short when we do miss? So that information feeds directly into, or you can take that information, and then when you go to do that lesson and do that swing analysis, you're doing a targeted lesson, right? You've got something that they're actually doing on the golf course that you want to go focus on, whether it be that mishit or that misclubbing. You have a targeted lesson to go fix that. And then the nice thing is that information, of course, feeds back to that on-course performance, and you can track if you're making progress. So you can say, okay, the next round, are we still missing short? Are we starting to miss short less and less often? Are we making better decisions? But it creates this nice feedback loop between your on-course performance, the lessons that you're giving, and are you achieving those results? And are you achieving those results in a more granular way that isn't just focused on score? Obviously, we all care about score, but sometimes if you're working on driving distance or you're working on something smaller, you want to see if you're making progress for those little mini milestones, knowing that they'll translate to score eventually. So next, I've got a few examples of how that might work. So again, your player is tracking their on-course performance. That information gets fed to V1 Coach, and maybe in this case, that player's got a power leak or they're struggling with power. And you would go see that by seeing that they're struggling with driving from a strokes gain perspective. Again, you could go look at their driving distance and get all that data out, and you can say, okay, really on the course, you're averaging whatever it is, 220 yards off the tee. And for your build swing speed, maybe you should be averaging much higher. And then you can go give that, again, targeted lesson that says, we're going to go focus on distance, or we're going to go focus on a way to get rid of that power leak. And V1 Game has the capability, again, to track driving distance. So if you've got some players that are motivated by Bryson DeChambeau and maybe hitting the gym, or maybe they're just short and they want to work on, hitting that center of that club face, now we can track things like driving distance and distance with their irons instead of just tracking that score. But again, you have that feedback loop to make sure that those efforts in the gym and efforts on the practice tee are translating on the golf course to longer drives in this case. The next example would be like iron accuracy. So again, it starts with the player tracking their on-course performance, but then in this case, the player might be struggling with missing the green. And what this allows us to do is to say when they have a shot at the green, so we're going to go ahead and remove bad tee shots that hit in the trees or whatnot. When you have a shot at the green, where do you miss, how do you miss, and how can we improve? And you'll see in this case, the user is tending to miss left and missing short. So what's the problem? Maybe it's a lie angle adjustment on the club. Maybe it is a swing fault. Maybe it's a grip adjustment. I'm not a teacher, so I can't really diagnose that. I just see what the problem is. But what this will do is allow that teacher to go look at that fault and then figure out what's causing that miss and actually work on it. And beyond that, we can take it even another level. So maybe I'll summarize all of your irons, but it might be specific yardages. So we can break it into buckets. And in this case, the player is losing most of their strokes from 126 to 150 yards. So now we're getting even more targeted. What is the club that we're using there? Maybe we're hitting pitching wedge, maybe we're hitting, 8-iron. Let's figure out what club we're hitting and where we're struggling, and go diagnose that fault, work on it on the practice tee, and again, feed it back and see if we're making progress. So that bottom plot is in this case strokes gained approach, but let's see if we're starting to trend that thing up. We're making better decisions with the irons, hitting better shots, hitting more greens, and having more fun. But again, feedback loop from on-course performance to the lesson tee. The last example.
And Dallas, the students they're seeing the same, right, as the coach, right? So they may have seen some of that, but right, they're not looking at different data, right?
Absolutely. So the data is available in the V1 game platform and the V1 coach platform. The V1 game platform has less of the artificial intelligence. It's going to say work on this unless they go get our virtual coach function. But this will never replace, I guess, the actual coaching piece in that
Right.
I'm a pretty advanced player, right? But if I go look at this and I see, let's say in my own game, I'm missing left and short, I know what the I know what the symptom is, but I don't know what the cure is. I don't know how to stop missing left and short.
Right.
And so I still need a coach to tell me, what is it that I'm doing that's causing that miss. So it does lead to more educated players, but it doesn't substitute the fact that I'm still going to need help fixing that fault. And if we can help, connect that teacher student relationship to work on the right thing, it'll just accelerate those improvements. And then two, when I show up to that lesson tee, I've been in this lesson situation where you show up and the coach is like, okay, well, what do you want to work on? What do you want to work on today? And before I had a platform like V1 Game, a lot of times I wouldn't know what was costing the most strokes. So I would just guess, or I'd tell you something that I struggled with on the last hole, the last round I played, right? Whereas in this case, it's a much more educated analysis of what you should be working on, so that now when I go to that lessons tee, either the coach is looking in V1 coach and saying, yep, we need to work on irons, or I'm coming armed with V1 game saying, hey, it's telling me I'm struggling here. This is what I need to work on. And I think that transitions well into the next example, which is putting, right? Because in my experience, you're not going to get a lot of players saying, hey, I need to go practice putting. Putting seems straightforward. Everybody can putt, right? But you're going to get feedback from V1 game to where maybe the biggest place where you're losing strokes is putting. Whether you're missing short ones or you're struggling with the lag putting to get the ball in the hole, this would be an opportunity to say, you know what, maybe I need a putting lesson this week. I need to get on the putting green and figure out what I'm doing there. If it's a grip adjustment, a posture adjustment, whatever it is, it's going to help me knock more putts, get more putts in the hole. So on the right, you see kind of an example of the output of V1 game where this user has a poor putting day, but the red would indicate 3 putts from a longer distance, and they're also missing short ones from inside 6 feet. So you can really focus on improving two things. You can say, okay, let's improve your lag putting and also work on the short ones, and those two combinations of things will lead to a better putting performance. And then again, that closed feedback loop. So on the bottom, in V1 game and V1 coach, we have this concept of 3 keys. It's not super novel. Hank Haney's talked about his keys to scoring as well, but it's 3 putts, 2 chips, and penalties. If you can eliminate those things, those are really scorecard wreckers, even at the highest level. I mean, Hank Haney's talked about it even with Tiger Woods trying to eliminate those things. So if you can eliminate 3 putts, 2 chips, and penalties, it's going to lead to better scoring, particularly for higher handicaps. So we can track those things and make sure that penalties a lot of times is decision making and course management. It could also be mishitting and not striking the ball well. But then 3 putts and 2 chips are usually things that you can make progress on very fast. Let's just work on our lag putting. Let's just work on getting the ball in the green when I'm inside 75 yards, and then we can work on hitting it close. So with that, that's really kind of the 3 examples of how it's connected from a slide perspective. If there's kind of no questions, or if you want, we can jump into kind of a live demo and show you what that looks like in the actual app.
Yeah, I think we're good. As far as questions go right now, I think they're getting handled in the chat right now. So I think you can jump in. I think once you get in here, I'm guessing we'll get a few more questions specific to the applications. Coach, how do you get it?
So it's on the Apple App Store. V1 Coach is an iPad app at this time. I guess the one thing I should say as well is you can also access your players' data in V1 Game. You can add your players either as friends or whatnot, and you can see their data in V1 Game without the artificial intelligence. It's going to tell them what to work on. But V1 Coach is an iPad platform. It's available on the Apple App Store, and you can go download it today and get started. So it's this gray icon that you see up here in the top left. So I'll go ahead and click on that, and it'll open. So one of the things you're going to do when you download V1 Coach is you're going to create a team. Create a team, or create a group that's yours. So in this case, I've called it V1 University. And the nice thing about that is when you create your team, if you got a logo, you can add a logo, you can add custom colors. And when you add your players, not only do they get added to your team, but it also rebrands their V1 game app. So now throughout the V1 game app, it's going to use your colors and your logo with the V1 logo as well. But they're going to see a rebranded experience and kind of give you that connection to that coach, to that team that they're working on. But so when you first open the app, it's got my custom colors, it's got my custom logo and my team name, and then right there in the middle, I see a list of the recent rounds that have been played by all my players. Um, and I'll and so first you can create your teams, you'd create your teams in manage or whatever, but we can go to the team management piece in a second. So I've got a bunch of players, they've been playing recently, I can see who's playing recently and what they're scoring. On the right hand side, you've got different functionalities from teach to coach to analyze, and then again manage is where you'll manage your team. But if I was going to go teach today, I can click on the teach icon, and it's going to pull up all of the students that I have underneath myself. And I can group them however I want. So you can see here, I've made a couple of groups. In this case, I made a group called Freshmen, and I'm comparing them to a male tour pro. My next group I called Starters, and I'm comparing them to a scratch golfer. It's a male. US Open champions comparing to a 5 handicap. But you can see I can kind of group these students however I want. And when I group them, in this case, the US Open champions I'm comparing to a 5 handicap, you'll notice now when I look at their strokes gained and when I look at their data throughout the app, it's comparing them to that 5 handicap instead of comparing them to a tour pro. So now I can help motivate them to take that next step in their game and their game improvement instead of always beating them down that you're never going to be a Dustin Johnson. The second thing you'll notice as I kind of scroll through this list of players is that area for improvement is also customized per player. So for the top two, you'll see it's going to tell them they need to work on driving accuracy. For Justin Thomas, in this case, needs to work on driving accuracy. He's missing to the right 25% of the time, and he's making, an error once in every 5 rounds. So again, these are tour pros, and I'll show you what a average golfer looks like kind of here in a minute. But as I scroll through, again, it's customized. So Marvin Caveman needs to work on his approach game where he's missing greens and leaving some on the table. Brooks Cupcake needs to work on his short game in this case. If I click on any of those players, it takes me to a deep dive of their data, or what we call the analyze section. So it's going to show you their strokes gained kind of here on the bottom. It shows you their recent rounds or all the rounds that they've played kind of here on the right. So you can dive into any of those. And then much of the data that's available on the V1 game platform is now also at your fingertips in this platform as well. So let's say Brooks Cupcake was struggling with irons. One of the things I can do, for instance, is click on his shot distributions here. And now it's going to show me by different distance buckets here where his shots are going and where he's missing. So again, this is a tour pro. He's playing very well, not missing greens a lot. But you can scroll through from 150 to 175 yards and scroll through different distances and say where might I start working with him. And so in this case, maybe we get further from the hole and he starts to miss short and right. That might be a conversation we have, and how can we go work on that just from an approach standpoint. You have putting data that you can dive into. This is showing 1 putt, 2 putt, and 3 putt percentages from different distances. All of these plots are interactive. If I tap anywhere on the plot, it's going to show me, or it's going to tell me what it is that I'm looking at. So, how often he 1 putts, 2 putts, 3 putts, or his strokes gained from any distance from the green. So starting from 6 to 10 feet all the way out to, putts of 50 feet or more. I've got, again, his recent rounds here. If I want to dive into any of those, let's say I had a player that just played yesterday and he wants to talk to me about that round and what he did well or maybe didn't do well, I can tap on any of these and I'm going to see the scorecard from that round on the top, including things like fairways and greens. I can swipe to see all of the holes. And so let's say he's complaining about a shot he hit on 16 and how did he make bogey there and what do we need to work on. If I tap on that, it's going to also bring up the map of the shot by shot, what he did that day. So then we can go through and say, okay, looks like you hit a decent tee shot. So you made bogey because of something that happened around the green. You could zoom in and say, okay, you just missed the green to the right-hand side and didn't get up and down. So was it a tough chip? Did we fluff it? What was the issue? What was the issue there? Our post-round summary is a key part of the V1 game platform for our players. And as a coach, you'll get access to that as well. So that's kind of what I'm showing here in the bottom left. This is the strokes gain performance based on this round, how they did. In this case, we're referencing a scratch, but they did the worst in this case, again, with the iron game. They didn't gain as many strokes with their approach game, but you could scroll through and it'll kind of tell you why, where they were missing, putting, driving, so on and so forth. So all that information is already extracted from the round for you, where you could kind of dive in and try to understand how your player performed or how they did what they did. Let me back out of that. So if you have a lot of players, or if you have a group of players, a group of juniors, you can also see this kind of information in the table view, right? Where you can compare players side by side, either for, in this case, looking at scoring or even looking at number of fairways per round. You can start to quickly glance amongst players and get that information. If you don't like the visualizations, you can get it as kind of a Excel table format as well to kind of go through their data if that's what you're used to. And that's really the teaching portion of a V1 coach. Again, targeted at making it so that if you're going to that lesson T right now, you can quickly see what that player is doing well or doing poorly and dive into a lesson that's going to make them better immediately.
Hey, Dallas, bring up a question. So we had Chris East asked a question. He said, effectively, so sounds great from one perspective, like virtually you're getting this data and whatnot. But his question was, can it replace an actual playing lesson? And I think part of that is, also I think I would imagine as a teaching professional, once you get that person in front of you, there's also that emotional, like how do they handle that shot? As they're on course and you do an actual playing lesson. How do you see this data integrating? Do you see it independent? Do you see it as a combination of in-person teaching and on-course playing lessons? What's your thoughts there?
I think it's additive. And what I mean by that is I don't think there's any replacement for a playing lesson if you're going to go pick a player's brain and what they're thinking of in the moment, right? Because it's one thing for, let's say, to digest after the round and go through and say, okay, I blocked the shot right. What were you thinking there? And I might tell you one thing that it might be hard to remember. I don't know what I was thinking in the moment or what my thought process was necessarily going into that shot that leads to the bad shot, because the memories or your thought process really isn't permanent before you've made the mistake. So I don't think there's a replacement for that on course lesson and sitting through a situation saying, what are you thinking right now? What are you trying to do? But I think it is an additional avenue to where if I can't get to that on-course lesson, it is an opportunity now for a coach to go look at their raw data and say, hey, I noticed in this situation you're doing this, right? I noticed on, the dog leg left, you're hitting it through the dog leg, or maybe you're biting off more than you could chew. So it does give an avenue for remote lessons, or maybe I don't need to be there in person to do some of it. And I see that more as being additive than replacing the on-course lesson. I think, if anything, it could help you get more out of that on-course lesson, because now we can look at the data, see what I'm doing, and then go on a golf course and get in a similar situation and say, okay, what are we thinking? What are we doing here? How do we correct what we saw in the data?
Yeah, and I think some of that is taking that data, and I think you hinted at it there, but to expand on it for a second, I think is to take that data and then put yourself in that situation, right? So you look at the data and say, okay, maybe you don't do well with dog legs left or the water on the right or whatever, right? And maybe you take that out to the course and put them in that situation, and maybe you're working on it from that perspective. But it might be a situational environment that the data then supports to say, let's go work on this on course or something like that. So yeah, I agree. I think it is a combination. It's a tool to add to your arsenal to help you improve with your players and whatnot.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I know, like, for myself, being a right-handed player, I struggle with a left to right wind, right? I tend to block it and I can't keep it on the planet. And I know that's something I struggle with, and my data would likely support that. But how do I fix that? What do I do differently? That's where the opportunity is to go get on a golf course with a teaching professional and say, okay, now I'm in that situation. What are some things I can do? Or, what should I be thinking to try to get around that uncomfortable situation when I'm there? And with the recent integration of weather information into V1 Game, you actually have that. Even if you go review a round, you can see what the wind was doing when you played that day. So you could actually go look at particular mistakes or shots you made and what the wind was doing at the same time to try to understand some of those details. So that was the teaching section that I showed. We have another section called Coach, and if I click on that, this one is more targeted kind of for tournament players or for groups, maybe high school coaches or college coaches, but it could also be used by teaching professionals with competitive players or even a group of juniors. But essentially here, you're more comparing players to each other, but it also allows you to do some fun stuff like some leaderboards and some records and kind of that gamification that's talked about these days. But what you're seeing on the left-hand side is that list of players. Again, they're grouped how I grouped them in the management section. I'll show you that here in a second. But I've got their average score, their total strokes gained, and then I've got their strokes gained broken out there where you could, compare and say, hey, there's different ways to shoot even par. Are you a good driver and poor with irons, or vice versa, or are you a really good putter? And you can start to compare players in that way. And then on the right-hand side, so let me go back. On the right-hand side, you have some fun stuff like records. So in this case, it's kind of a leaderboard. If I tap on any of these, it's going to show me the top 5. So this will show me the top 5 drives, who's hitting them. So now if I have a group of players, I could motivate them in ways that's more than just let's go shoot scores, right? I might have a player that's never going to be on the long drive leaderboard, but maybe they could be on the proximity to the hole leaderboard, or they could be on the scrambling leaderboard. And so it's a nice way to track other stats similar to what they have on the PGA Tour and get players motivated. And again, we have full filtering capability, right? So you can almost have weekly challenges or whatever, right? Who can make the most birdies this week, that type of thing. It's all fully capable here. I hinted earlier as well.
Sorry to cut you off here. So that's gamification is for the overall team, but also can be for a specific group within the team. Correct?
Correct. Yeah. So here I've got, all the players that this coach might be doing, right? But if I wanted to go, let's say I had a group that was just juniors, or in this case, maybe I'll look at just the freshmen. If I do a search or whatever, it's going to filter to just that group. So in this case, I'm looking at just the freshmen. You'll see my leaderboards now only have 2 players on it instead of 5. So I can look at all the players in my arsenal, or I could go filter down to just a smaller group and then have that conversation on who's leading just this group. And that carries over to the strategy piece as well. So when I click on the strategy button, what you'll see is this should be familiar to anybody who's watched a PGA Tour event lately, but it's a shot link kind of view. So this is showing where all of these players have hit tee shots and what they scored from that location. So this was like a high school team, right? You could have all of the players that have hit the shots on the first tee, and you could start going through that and say, okay, guys, from a course management perspective, it doesn't look like there's any value here in laying up. We should be trying to cut the corner, hit it as far as we can to go score better. And again, you can zoom in and see what those shots look like around the green and try to, obviously this is pin dependent on a given day, but you can filter it by day even and say, where's the right spot to miss this green, long, short, whatnot. You can go hole by hole even and say, okay, what's the hardest hole? What's the easiest hole? And kind of going into a tournament, let's say you have a bunch of practice rounds logged by this group. You could go look at their practice rounds and make that strategy for that tournament that says, hey, let's take it easy on this hole and par is a good score versus this hole. Maybe we want to, cut that dog leg and take all the risk because it's worth it based on the data that we have. But again, this is fully filterable as well. So if I go back and filter to that.
What's the player seeing on their end, right? From this, perspective, right? I mean, they're seeing the same thing, but obviously it's an aggregate of all their rounds, right? In this case, we're looking at aggregates of players, correct? In this case?
Yeah, so a player with our virtual coach offering and with our new Course Explorer offering, they can go look at this within their own shots for a given golf course and see where they've hit shots. They wouldn't necessarily have to see how the rest of the team has hit shots. So depending on how often you've played a course, you may not have as much data. But this data is there to the player. Again, connecting it with the coach allows you to have a conversation about it and make those good decisions and make sure they're not being reckless with what's in front of them. But
they can see, though, like a series of rounds, right? So, whether it's home course or what have you, they can see when they hit it here, they get 6, right? Or tendency is, right? If they're hitting, if they're still laying up, like the coach asked them to, they're typically getting 4. But that's starts with the coach seeing a hole by hole performance of the collective group, and then that player going and seeing it in game, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool.
So that's kind of the strategy piece. Again, fully filterable. You can go dive in as deep as you want to go. If I want to tap on any of these players, again, it's going to show me the same data, what rounds they've played, what they've done recently. I can go dive into, say, driving distance if I want, see how they're doing for that. Or I can, dive into any of these pieces of data that we have on that player. It's at your fingertips as deep as you want to go. If you want to see shot by shot information, you can do that by going into the round and looking at where they hit every single golf shot that they hit. But the real benefit of V1 Coach is we're doing a lot of that heavy lifting for you and giving you that quick summary that says this is what that player should be working on and moving towards. I alluded to the filters too, that you can change that, right? So if I could go change to like just the last 5 rounds, you'll see the data adjusts based on whatever's there. So um, again, you can use that to say, long term, how are we doing for the last 20 rounds? What are we doing on just the last 5? What do we do on just the last 1 round? And start to compare if the player's making progress and doing things better, or if it's the same old, same old. I mean, if I change this to say just the most recent round, let's go look at just a 1 round snapshot and say, okay, what should you be working on now? And you can do that very easily. So how do you manage a team like this? I'm showing you what it looks like when it's complete. But when you go to team management, or when you first download the app, it's going to give you the option to download our demo team, which is the team I've been showing you guys today. Or you can create a new team. If you create a new team, it'll walk you through the steps, and we can do that here in a second. But if I show you kind of the high level organization of what we're doing, you can have multiple teams. So for instance, if I'm a golf course and I have multiple teaching pros, I could have each teaching pro have their own team in one app, and I could go see all of the players across all of those teams if I want. It's pretty flexible with the way that you organize it. But you have what's called a team, which is what I was showing you at D1 University. Within a team, you can have groups. And the way to think about groups is those are players you want to be grouped together because either they're similar skill sets, or whatever other reason you might want to group different players together. So you can see in this case, I've created 3 groups: freshmen, starters, US Open champions. For a teaching pro, that might be juniors, high handicappers, low handicappers. It might be, Tuesdays, Thursdays. However you want to navigate the app to make it really easy to filter to what it is you're trying to find, it's flexible. But the group allows you to do those quick searches and quick drill downs to find a group of similar players. Once you add a group, and here I'll go into freshmen, for example. Once you add a group, you'll choose whether the strokes gained reference for that group is male or female. So I'll choose male. And then you'll choose any handicap level from Tour Pro to 25 handicap. And what this is used for is that comparison. When we say you need to work on driving, it's because you need to work on driving relative to this reference, whether it's a 5 handicap, 10 handicap. So you can change that to whatever you want it to be. And now everybody that's in that group will be compared to the 10 handicap I just chose. Moving those players around is as simple as dragging and dropping. So I can say, yep, I want him with the freshmen. This one isn't assigned to a group, so I'll move him into starters. And now they'll be compared together. So really easy to move them around, to delete or add players. If you want to add a player, just click the plus button. You'll type in their email address. It'll pre-populate an email that tells them how to download the app, how to get started. And as soon as they join the app, they get a nice invite that asks them to join this platform and to join your team.
Can a player, so Matt had a question about players being connected to 2 different coaches, right? Non-issue, right?
Non-issue. They are fully capable of being members of multiple teams. So you can imagine a player might be a member of their high school team and have a teaching professional. They can be a member of both of those teams, and both those coaches will get the data from that player. And on the player's device, they can select what team they're interacting with that day. Now the data goes to both, but in terms of like the branding, and if they want to go look at team information or whatever, they might change that on their device. But no conflict with the player being on multiple teams. That data will go to both coaches.
Tammy had a question too, and I think you started you kind of answered it, right? Which was, she was asking about where can I go get this data, right? This demo data, right? So when you go add a team, the demo team is a choice, correct? Right, for the coach, and then they can see everything that we've been walking through here in the last 30 minutes or so, right?
Yeah. So when you first download the app, there's going to be nothing here on the home screen. This is the home screen. It's going to pop up. It's going to be blank because there's nothing here. And the first thing it's going to ask you is, what do you want to do? Do you want to download our demo team so that you can, basically navigate the app and see what it looks like when you have players? Or do you want to create a new team? I highly suggest everybody download the demo team, because until you have players connected, feeding data to your team, there's not a lot to look at. It's an empty template with no data in it, right? So download the demo team. That way you can navigate it, get familiar with it, and then go create your new team. I'll show you how to do that. So if you want to create a new team, it's simple. You hit the plus button. You'll say create new team. It'll take you to this easy to fill out form. You'll give the team a name. You'll give it your coach email, your name. You'll give a password for a coach. So you'll need that, or that password is basically just to protect anybody else from making edits. You'd have to have that password to make edits if you're not logged into this app. You can have a player password. The player password isn't typically needed, but it would allow a player to join your team without an invite if they had that password. Otherwise, most of the player back and forth is handled with invites and is very clean. You can add a logo if you want. You can change to any color you want for your primary color, second color, so it looks like a branded experience. And if you're ready with a list of emails, you can go drop them in there and send it off. So if I make a dummy team real quick just to show you what that looks like, I'll say.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. Hey, Ryan,
Yep.
can you change your chat settings so that you're chatting to panelists and attendees with your answers? I know you're in there answering the technical questions. Thanks.
Done.
So I can come in here, for instance, I'll make it red and black because I'm a Texas Tech grad, but you can go change your colors to be whatever. You can add your logo. If I want to go add a student in here, I'll add one. And you can add as many as you want. I think it's semicolon delimited or comma delimited. It tells you the visible to players field. What that does is it determines whether or not other people that join your team can see other people's stats on your team. So if I'm a teaching professional, I probably want to turn that to false because I don't want my, senior to be able to see the guy next door that's also on my team and see his data. I don't necessarily want to share data that way. But if I'm a high school coach, I probably want to set that to true so that all my high school players can see what the other high school players are doing and scoring. But you have that flexibility in terms of that readability of the data. So when I'm done here, I can submit that team. It's going to ask you if you have a home course. You don't have to select a home course, but if you do select a home course, it'll add that information as well. I'll choose Pecan Hollow, set that home course. It'll pre-populate an email that it's going to send to all of the players that you added to tell them how to download, how to get started. You don't have to send this email. You can hit cancel, but if you do send it, it'll give them all the instructions to get started. So we've tried to make that as easy as possible for you. In this case, I'm not going to send it to myself. I don't need to, but it'll have created that team. In this case, you can see that it's rebranded. If I added a logo, it would have added a logo, and that invite is pending. So if I go back here, it's going to tell me that I have an invite pending to that player that I just invited. And then I've got a simulator running here. So this should work, but since we're not going to go over V1 game here, I'll kind of show you what that looks like. But now if this player, let me close it, the first time they open the app and they come in here, they're going to get a request, right? So this is how easy it is for their players. The first time they log into the app, or whether it's the 100th time they log into the app, if you've invited them to join, it's going to say Coach Dallas Webster wants you to join their team dummy. And if they hit that button, join, it rebrands the app. Now the app is red and black. If I go in here, you'll see that team is added as one of my teams. I could have multiple teams here, but if I would have added a logo, that logo would show up here as well. So now every time they open the app, they're going to see my Teaching Academy logo and my colors throughout the app as they use it and as they parse it. So it's that simple for the player to join your team. And now every time I go log in here, let's filter back to here, hit refresh. Since I've joined, now you can see that I hit refresh. That player is now on my team. And when I go back, I'll start to see their data populate everywhere. So it's really that simple for you to connect the players' data to yourself. Now, if you're adding new players that aren't on the V1 game platform, it's probably going to take a little while for them to go play some rounds, right? They're not going to have rounds day one, but it's that simple to add players, get that data connected to you, and to start diving into what they need to work on and how you can help them play better golf.
So we were seeing a few, and Ryan's picking these off. There's a few questions on pricing, but in terms of the invite, there's a couple different ways. I guess the players can get access, right? They can in-app purchase, right? They can purchase through the V1 Sports website. We do have a wholesale program so that we can add a monthly fee to your existing instructor subscription. Where you'll get some credits and you can just invite players and then they'll have access to the app. So if there's questions on that front, you can email sales team. You can email mike.brown@v1sports.com if anybody has questions there, post the event tonight or, obviously in the next few days. So obviously some relevant things. Ryan, anything else that we need, there's a few other questions here that we need to pick off.
Well, I was trying to answer one, but David Banks asked the question, how much drain will this put on the player's phone? Look, in my experience, on a fully charged phone, I go out and I have GPS running. It's in my back pocket and we're going. I may get down to 60% if I start at 100. So I think it's pretty minimal. I don't know, Dallas, what's your experience? Obviously, as phones get older, in the generations, if you will, that can obviously have an impact because obviously batteries degrade over time and whatnot. But I'm running an iPhone 10, so I think the last time I played it was about maybe 40% or so.
Yeah, so it depends heavily on use case, right? So we have players that use the app in a variety of different ways. So when I play, let's say I'm playing a course that I know and I know well, then typically I'm running the watch app. The watch has my yardages. My phone's in my back pocket or it's in my golf bag. And I literally start the round, I put the phone away and I don't touch it till I'm done, till I'm walking off the 18th green. And if I do that, you're talking about it taking 10 to 15% of your phone's battery. Really, really small impact because the biggest drain on a phone battery is the screen being on. Now, if I'm playing a course I've never played before and I'm pulling out the app every time and doing virtual caddy to give an idea of what club I should hit, and I'm tapping on the screen to get yardages and to plan and see where the hazards and stuff are, and I get done, now you're talking about probably more like a 50%, right? If you're pulling it out every shot, you're looking at that 50% range. But the core technology of GPS tracking and the shot tracking to enable these stats is very minimal. Where you see, again, phone battery getting drained is the players that have it out all the time with the screen on and maybe they're shooting emails in between and that kind of stuff. That's where the phone battery drains. Now on the watch side, I guess I should mention that because a lot of our users that do have Apple Watch, that's their favorite feature. It does have swing detection, meaning we're using the accelerometers and other sensors to actually detect when the user swings, which makes our shot detection very accurate. That can be a little hard on the older watches, really Series 2 is where it was a problem. But we actually filed a ticket with Apple, 2 or 3 months ago to get them to turn off the heart rate sensor, and they did it for us. So actually the battery life on the watch has been much improved recently as well. But phone battery should not be a problem. The watch side, you'll want to make sure your watch is charged if you're going to play that day, for sure, because that can be a little bit bigger of a drain.
I feel like we should turn it back on to capture that emotion that Chris East was talking about. So get those we can monitor that in the future. So
yeah, you can track the heart rate monitor in that sense. It was a pretty big drain. I had a Series 2 watch that I could only make it through about 12 holes when the heart rate monitor was on. With the heart rate monitor off, you're able to play 18 holes even on the oldest watch, the Series 2. So
I'll be quiet with my feature requests. So all right, keep going.
So high level, I guess those are the big things that I want to cover. If there's no questions or whatnot, those were the big features from V1 Coach. Obviously, V1 Game is a big piece of that. We plan to cover that more tomorrow. I can show a little bit of that if you think that's going to add value tonight. Or...
Why don't you high level, Dallas? I think we've got a little bit of time. I think that'd be useful for those that won't be able to join us tomorrow, and for those that are with us tonight, we're recording all these and we'll distribute to everybody, right? So that if you can't attend tomorrow, we'll take care of you.
Okay, sure. So in this case, again, V1 Game at its core is a golf GPS app. So when a player is going to play, they'll hit the play button. It's going to pull up a list of nearby courses. They can, of course, search for a course if they want to. You could actually put in rounds from your couch for a round you played a week ago if you've got a good memory. But they'll select the golf course that they're going to play. They're going to select the round type. And really, this is, again, used for filtering so that you can separate tournament performance from maybe just your casual Sunday round. But if I choose casual, it's going to go load the GPS. Recently we added real-time weather. So you got that real-time weather of what the wind's doing. You'll see my simulated GPS location here, but I can kind of tap anywhere on the screen, get yardages, figure out, where the front of the green is, maybe where hazards are. So we are a GPS at the basic level that your players can use every time they're on the golf course to help select clubs and make better decisions, right? That's kind of the table stakes, let's say, to start in this part of it. We do have additional features like your virtual coach, or virtual caddy. So in this case, if I click on virtual caddy, it's going to give me an idea of what it plays like. So in this case, you'll notice I'm 225 yards from the pin, but it's playing like 216 yards because it is downwind and it's also slightly downhill on this golf course. But you have the virtual caddy piece that's enabled with our Eagle subscription to help them make decisions. If you track club information, it'll give you not just suggestion of add or subtract clubs, it'll also tell you, hey, you should hit a 7-iron. And it'll start to show overlays of where you might typically hit your 7-iron. So at the core, we're a golf GPS. If you put in scores, so typically the auto shot tracking and the breadcrumbs would be following me around and making shot predictions and using the watch. In this case, I'm just stationary. But basically, to start tracking shots, it's very simple. What the user is going to do is they're just going to put in a score. So let's say I made a 4 with a 1 putt from, call it 9 feet. When I'm done, it's going to basically add shots. Now, in this case, since it doesn't know where I went and I don't have auto shot track, I'm not, I don't have the breadcrumbs because I haven't played the hole. It's pre-populated it with 4 shots to add up to my score of 4. And if I need to make edits, let's say you hit a ball out of bounds or penalties, there will be some times when you have to make edits, even though our shot tracking is very good. It's super simple. You grab a shot, just a long press, drag it to where it needs to go. So maybe my drive went there, my tee shot went to, call it 132 yards. I'm looking at that label at the bottom to kind of dial that in, 132 yards, and then I missed the green short and right. And what I just did would be what I would do to mark a hole if I didn't use the app on the golf course and I'm sitting at my house and I want to mark it after the fact. I could go in whatever that was, 10 seconds, mark a golf hole, having not even used the app on the golf course. If you want to add club information, super simple. Tap on a shot, say that was a 3-wood. Tap on that shot, say that was a pitch and wedge. You don't have to track club information. You can just track clubs on some shots and not all shots. We'll use whatever information you give us. But so with that simple input, we've tracked that hole. And now if you look at it from a coach and a game perspective, I know this player hit a 3-wood off the tee. I know they hit the fairway. I know they missed the green. I know they missed the green short and right. And I know they made a 9-foot putt to save par. So all of those little stats you don't even think about, but you just gave me a whole lot of information just marking the locations of where you went.
So for the coach, right, who, is, and even just, the players that are joining us tonight, right? So there's still a bunch of output without, I could just leave my pocket, still get tracked, not put in any club information, right? And I'm still getting stats that are valuable to my coach or myself, right? I just don't see the efficiency or effectiveness of specific clubs, right?
Correct. So 90% of our data doesn't even care what club you hit, because a lot of times, look, I live in Texas. I can hit a pitch and wedge 80 yards and I can hit it 180 yards. It just depends on the wind and the conditions that day. So club information is not necessarily as important. What we're looking for are kind of trends of what you do in certain situations. So a lot of our data is showing buckets of distance from the hole. Like, what do you do from 125 to 150 yards? I don't care if it's an 8-iron or a pitch and wedge. What I want to know is from that distance, do you tend to miss short, long, right, left? Because a lot of that type of decision making and even shot tendencies are independent of club for the most part. Now, if you want to see it by club, we have that information as well. But the point being is the club information is optional. It adds some value, but you'll get 90% of the benefit without ever tracking a club, so that you can get the data in real fast and not even worry about and just play.
So Dallas, with a few minutes left here, so let's pick up the last few questions here. So Matt asked about, does a tournament round get rid of the wind and direction?
Absolutely. So tournament round takes away strokes gained. It takes away the virtual caddy. You can't use the virtual caddy feature anymore. It takes away wind and elevation and makes us USGA compliant. So yes, we take care of that if you choose a tournament round versus a regular round. You still get all the shot tracking functionality so that round is useful from a data perspective, but all that data gets hidden from you until you're done.
And Tammy asked, will it calculate the length of the putt? How does that work?
Yeah, so how the length of the putt works, and if you saw how I was marking it here, what the information that we ask for is to give us the score, the number of putts, and the first putt distance, and we do the rest. And the reason why we ask for first putt distance is because GPS itself is only accurate to about 3 or 4 yards, and there's a huge difference between an 8-foot putt and a 30-foot putt. It's huge in terms of strokes gained. So GPS itself is not accurate enough to get putting distance. But if you give us the first putt distance, we can do the rest. We make some assumptions on what that second putt is, and that can always be fine-tuned after the fact. But we do ask you to give us the putting distance. So each time, and you see me, I'm marking holes kind of as I talk here. For each hole, really the user input is as simple as score, number of putts, and what distance the first putt was from. So I could very quickly go mark a handful of shots even while we talk, not even thinking about it. Now I've marked a handful of shots. Now, if I was on the golf course, the auto shot detection would get these shots in the right place. Since I'm not on the golf course and this is a demo here, it's not going to. But again, those edits are super easy to just go drag it, get it where you want.
So Wayne had a creative question here. Can you use this for tracking data on a practice session? Like hitting 20 to 30 balls, at one, at a target, let's say.
Yeah, I guess we get that question quite a bit in terms of even sitting on a driving range. That's certainly not built into the app. I mean, the app is kind of built around having a score, but I think it is an interesting thought, I guess, for myself as a developer. If there was a way for you to hit shots and give an idea of proximity, you could absolutely calculate distances and strokes gained. I would say it's not necessarily built for that right now. Now, if you're going to go on a golf course and practice and hit some shots and only play 3 holes, you can still track just those 3 holes. The app is smart enough to only use the data that you give it. So you can use it in that way. It's not geared towards a driving range type of experience today, but that might be something we think about moving forward.
And then I think one of our last questions here, is the coach seeing players' data in real time? Or does the round have to be saved? How does that, when do they get to see that data?
So it's a good question. Right now, the data is updated to the cloud real time. So if a coach wanted to sit there and hit the refresh button, it should technically refresh every time they put in a score. We're currently building out the live scoring capability to where you could actually follow where they went on a golf course, even from like a tournament perspective. We have that capability. It's not a view that's shown kind of publicly right now, but the scores do go to the cloud real time. And then we're getting real close to releasing a friends mode as well, to where if 2 players are playing at the same time or a coach is playing with the player or whatever, you can do that kind of live leaderboard and live shot tracking as well across multiple devices, multiple people playing at the same time. So I'd say kind of stay tuned on that, because we're going to expand on that capability as we move forward.
But from that real-time perspective, if you've got a team and they're in a qualifying round, what have you, right? And that coach can't be on every hole, right, at once. But if he or she wants to watch players, right, and how they're doing in that round, right? I mean, that's a potential concept, right, of seeing that real time.
I would say stay tuned, because that's coming.
Okay. All right. Dallas, Ryan, anything else? Any other nuggets before we say goodnight and close it out for the day?
Yeah, from my perspective, I certainly appreciate the time. I think there's look, I'm a data nerd, so I have to confess that first, but I think there's a huge amount of power in connecting teachers to on-course data with a chance to accelerate improvement of your students. And that's where I think the future is headed as well. If you look at the best in the business, the Justin Thomases and whatnot, they're definitely using data to make themselves better each and every year. And we're hoping to kind of fill that gap and help our teachers do exactly that. So encourage you to get started, encourage you to get your students to get started in collecting the data. It's free for them to start using it and start collecting that data. And then if there's something in here that's missing or an idea that you have that could make this even easier, we're all ears and trying to move fast and make sure we're solving that problem. So appreciate the time and the opportunity for sure.
Dallas, thank you. Ryan, thank you as well. And thank you to Anna and Kelly for overseeing this and making this go well all day. And obviously thank you to all of our guests today. Just awesome. Thank you for, the support, right? And we're going to have a great day tomorrow too. And hopefully we helped with creating a game plan for your students here this evening, right? Or at least laid some good groundwork. So our team, as everybody probably knows here that's listening, our team is available. Where you can reach us, either at sales@v1sports.com or support@v1sports.com. So we look forward to talking to you all soon.
And that last note, I guess, on that game plan is your students are going to get value the first round they play. They're going to get a post-round summary that starts giving them useful information. So even if they haven't been tracking for months, one round and they're going to get some stats that will hopefully blow their mind, get them started in the right direction.
All right. Good stuff, fellas.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.
Thank you. See you guys.